Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first presentation of What's New in Digital Literacy and Digital Technologies. My name is Anna Canane, and I am a lead educator at the Grok Academy, and I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague and good friend, Paula Christopherson, who is also a lead educator at the Grok Academy. This is the first of a series of 7 presentations which will all be delivered by our Grok educators. And over the duration, our aim is twofold. Firstly, in regard to the Australian curriculum, we want to provide you with some information about the what, and that includes changes from version 8 to version 9, and to also provide you with some practical examples of the how. So our facilitators will share some lesson ideas, some learning experiences, and also provide some suggestions for assessment. So we understand that you, our audience, will be comprised of teachers from all year levels, so we've tailored our sessions to suit you. Our sessions have been divided into those relevant for F to 2, 3 to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, 10. We have a series of 7 presentations, with the first one being the Introduction to the Australian Curriculum, Digital Technologies version 9. The following sessions, as you can see by the slide there, cover the concepts, and we end with a Designing and Assessing Digital Technologies project session. Paula and I have intimate knowledge of the digital technologies curriculum and the digital literacy capability, as we were both involved as authors of the original version 8, alongside our CEO, James Curran. Paula and I were also involved in the review of both the digital technologies curriculum and the digital literacy capability. Paula and I always find it, I think, personally rewarding to have the opportunity to share our understandings and knowledge of this curriculum with teachers such as yourselves, and to support you to actually broaden and strengthen your understandings. We're both really excited to see how teachers interpret the content and transform it into engaging learning experiences and lessons. Remember, whilst you might not have had any influence over the content, what you have is 100% influence over how it's received, how engaging it can be. And on that note, I'm going to ask Paula to introduce herself and just say a bit of a hello.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, I've had the privilege of working with the original ICT General Capability, and as Anna said, one of the co-authors of version 8.4 of the Digital Technologies curriculum. And then over the passage of time for the following decade, we were also involved in the review and the rewriting. So it is a privilege to be able to share our knowledge with you, and we take you on this initial journey, and we hope that you will be stay through the whole series and become really familiar as well as inspired by the digital technologies curriculum and the role of digital literacy in teaching and learning.
Grok Academy is an Australian educational non-for-profit organisation to support teachers and students across Australia and New Zealand. So there's a range of resources and courses available to you. Here, we're just going to give you a little bit of a snapshot of some of the resources available to you. But if you visit the website, you're going to be able to find those resources and courses for yourself. We do have a range of unplugged learning materials, and you're going to hear our facilitators mention some of these examples of unplugged activities. And I'm also going to share a couple of those throughout the session. Curriculum support. So we have extensive support with unpacking the Australian curriculum. We also have an unpacking curriculum resource that is going to be updated to reflect the changes in version 9. The platform is really user-friendly. The teacher dashboard allows you to manage your classes and see your students as they progress. Some of the projects available to our teachers and educators: the school cybersecurity challenges. The cyber skills Ataria, and I always wonder whether I'm pronouncing that correctly. Paula, is that the way we pronounce it?
That's what I'm saying.
Which is an industry and New Zealand government collaboration, and the DT Applied, which is also a very exciting project, and you can read about all of those on our website. We also have the automation challenges, collaboration with the Chamber of Minerals and Energy, a project underway in Western Australia, the Quantum Challenge, and the Digital Technology Challenges, which is the federal government funded project supporting teachers such as yourselves with computing education. We're going to have a look at the first instance at the digital literacy capability, some of the changes that have occurred from version 8 to version 9. And then Paul is going to share with you a similar example of digital literacy curriculum and looking at the significant changes. And this session is going to give you a little bit of an overview and set you up for the sessions that follow. The big change here is that it has a new name. You may be familiar with the fact that the previous name was the ICT capability. It's now digital literacy. So that's the biggest thing I think we need to mention. Now, Paula and I have seen, I suppose, this issue or problem from the get-go when the digital technologies curriculum was first implemented. There's been quite a bit of confusion about the difference between the digital technologies discipline and digital technologies, which often are represented in lowercase. So this graphic is giving you a little bit of an understanding of the difference. So the digital technologies discipline or curriculum, as you see in uppercase there, is the subject within the technologies discipline. And within the digital technologies subject, there is specific content and skills related to the creation of digital solutions. But when we talk about digital literacy, which was the old ICT general capability, we're talking about supporting students to use the technology. So as the definition states there, encompasses the knowledge that students need to create, manage, communicate, investigate information, ideas, and solve problems. It's the doing. And then the digital tools themselves include devices such as our phones, our laptops, our robots, our data loggers, etc. Sometimes you will see digital technologies lowercase, and in that respect, we are speaking about the devices, systems, etc. Did you want to add anything there, Paula?
No, I think that's a terrific coverage, Anna.
Broadly speaking, we've now got a reorganisation of the elements. And can I tell you, we've gone from 5 elements to 4, and I'm going to share those with you very shortly. We have a new element, which is called practicing digital safety and wellbeing, which is very relevant to, I suppose, those skills and knowledges and practices we want our students to be au fait with and engaging in due to a lot of changes in our world. There is also, much to our delight, explicit links to the learning areas. Now, Paula and I have been working with teachers to support them in the understandings of these areas for many years. And one of the things we always mention is that the digital literacy capability has opportunities to be, I suppose, there's opportunities in all learning areas for the skills and knowledges of this capability to be consolidated. And it's really great to see that now when you go to the website, the links are much more obvious, and I'm going to be demonstrating some of that. So as I mentioned, we've gone from 5 elements to 4. Now you'll notice communicating with ICT has gone, and we now have combined that, so we've got creating and exchanging. We've added the practicing digital safety and wellbeing. We still have investigating, and we have our managing and operating. So you can see similar but slightly different with the addition of practicing digital safety and wellbeing. With the tyranny of time, we won't have time to go through all of the elements, so we're just going to focus on one today to give you an example of the structure and the format. But if you have a look at this slide, there will be, when you do visit the continuum, you'll see that there's clear progression. The statements are much simpler to provide more clarity to teachers and for you to actually know what is expected at this particular year level. Now, let's have a look at our new one, our new kid on the block, which is practicing digital safety and wellbeing. Now, that is the element, but in each of the elements, there are sub-elements. And in this particular one, we have 3 sub-elements: managing online safety, managing digital privacy and identity, and managing digital wellbeing. Now, when we go into the capability, the levels are clearly articulated, and we're going to focus now on the sub-element, manage online safety. This is a newbie. So as you can see, level 1 is just foundation. And this dot point here is explaining to us what is expected at foundation when we are supporting our students to manage online safety. Level 2, years 1 and 2, level 3, 3, 4, level 4, 5, 6. Now you can see underneath those symbols where we've got HPE, T or A, technology, arts. When you click on those, they will take you directly to the learning area and the expectation, or what I like to call are the digital literacy demands of those learning areas. So these are great examples of how you can include these learning experiences in your lessons. And then level 5, as you can see the progression up to year 7 and 8, we're looking now into things related to online bullying, engaging in negative online social interactions, stopping that from happening, and of course looking at the legal and ethical online behaviour as we move to year 9 and 10. And of course there's some really lovely links to the HPE curriculum in this particular sub-element. Now, when you do go to this sub-element, as you can see the chain across the top, the pathway, if you're in digital literacy, we're now in practicing digital safety and wellbeing. We've now moved to manage online safety, and here we are in technologies. Remember I told you those symbols, if you clicked on the T, it would take you to the digital technologies curriculum with specific elaborations that give you a bit of an example of the how. How can I support digital literacy while I am in the technologies curriculum? What do you think it means to be digitally literate? I often ask this question in workshops, and it's really wonderful to see so many different responses. Here is the ACARA definition, but I have summarised it for you because it's pretty lengthy. So as you can see, to be digitally literate, we want our students to be able to create, to manage, to communicate, to investigate data. We want them to be able to solve problems. A big one is the collaboration of working collaboratively, critically identify and appropriately select and use devices and systems, and of course protect the safety of themselves and others. And I'm assuming that while we're going through this, you're thinking of examples of what you already do in your classrooms and what that might look like in your particular context and your setting. What does digital literacy look like in the classroom? We're going to now get into the how, the actual examples. Now, this graphic I put together last year when we spoke at EduTech, and I think it's a really useful slide because it shows you exactly what the digital literacy demands are within each of these learning areas. So no surprises in English, lots of reading online, creating and editing multimodal presentations. Mathematics is obvious, the construction of graphs, collecting and managing, interpreting data. In science, looking at simulation software, again, collecting, analysing, presenting data. Our humanities, very similar, using tools, particularly in geography, where we're looking at spatial technologies. The arts, a lot of creative work going on in the arts, so you'd be dabbling in the element of creating, and HPE again, looking at Data, again, is another one in HP, and I'll talk to you about that a little bit later as well, particularly when they're planning for their personal nutrition and physical activity plans. And then again, in languages, a little bit similar to our English. All right, so here's a couple of examples I've put together for you. We've got students who, while they are in science, the expectation was that they were, and I remember doing this at school, dissecting a frog. But before they actually got their hands on the frog, and they actually did the real dissection at the University of Queensland here in Brisbane, before they went, they were able to, through digital literacy and engaging with tools and some really cool apps, were able to dissect the frog virtually. Now, I found Frogopedia. It's an app that is absolutely fantastic because you've got different ways to use this app. As you can see here, students are actually dissecting the second clip image there. The young man is using his app, or the part of the app where the dissection can occur. You can also look at the life cycles of the toad, but here they're both using the iPad and the VR tools to actually look into the human body virtually. Now, while they are in science, engaging in a concept or an expectation in the Year 8 science curriculum, they are using their digital literacy skills to support their work in this learning area. But you can see how we are in the context of science. There is an authentic, purposeful reason for using or managing and operating, that would be the element that we would be looking at, managing and operating tools and devices. My next one, and this is a favourite of mine, Paul has heard this over the years, but it's a goodie. This is Year 4. Those of you that are Year 4 teachers will know this one very well. When we're looking at the stories of the First Fleet within the strand of knowledge and understanding, and looking at particularly the convicts. Now, if we look at the digital literacy expectation here, the students are going to be navigating or searching around in the convict database to find information about our convicts, when they were sent, why they were sent, how long. Well, everyone apparently was sent for 7 years, by the way, so but none of them ever went back. Interesting. Now, I've added the digital technologies content description here because this is a beautiful example of how you're in history. You're going to be doing a little bit of navigating in a database in digital literacy, but the digital technologies curriculum also has some great, I suppose, opportunities for students to then do something like this, where they can use their knowledge of Scratch to create a little quiz to test their peers on what they learned after they went through this unit on convicts on the First Fleet. And the little quiz that they would code here is, what was the punishment for murder? There's just a nice example for you. Now we're moving to Year 6, and this is a history example from HASS. In the history curriculum, as you know, we have historical skills. So I've got the knowledge and understanding and the historical skills, which is in this case questioning and researching. Content description, where students are actually looking at the migration, reasons why people migrate to Australia. So while they are in this learning area in history, looking at this, beautiful opportunity for them to maybe start creating some infographics and presenting their data in a different way. And you'll see in the digital literacy element of investigating, we're now in the sub-element of interpreting data, and the expectation is that they can analyse and visualise data using a range of digital tools to identify patterns and make predictions. And you can see there's a lot of infographic tool creators and wonderful apps out there to support your students to create these cool infographics. Geography Year 8. Now, I saw this myself, courtesy of St Joseph's Nudgee College here in Brisbane, where the geography teacher had asked the students one of the expectations was to ascertain or assess their knowledge of whether they understood the features of a volcano. Now, in the resource centre, the teacher had laid out a lot of Lego equipment, a lot of blocks and sticky notes, etc., for students who might want to create their volcano manually with Lego. But a couple of young fellows went and decided to use some software. One of them was in a drawing program. Another decided to use some simulation software. But this is just an example where in managing and operating in digital literacy to help those students, I suppose, with the task that they have been asked to undertake in geography. One of my faves, this is the health and PE example where students are expected to create their own personal health plan to document their physical activity over time. Now, most students have Fitbits or Garmin's or devices that can track their movements, walking, running, etc. But this is a nice example of where you can use that data and the students can then, while they're in HPE, plan their health plans. And again, you'll see I've popped up there, level 5, 7, 8. The expectation in the digital literacy capability is that they use simple planning tools to develop and follow a plan to complete individual and collaborative projects. I landed on that after I hit the HPE icon within the website. And finally, I just wanted to bring this up because NAPLAN Online, this is a really good opportunity while you are supporting your students to actually go into the practice tests. Have a look at some of the beautiful examples of digital literacy where you can ask your students or support them to understand icons. What does the plus mean? Okay, obviously that's to make things bigger. The little dots there to help them know where they're tracking, and then the flag down the bottom to support them to know which ones they might need to go back to if they haven't actually finished that. But this is just an example of how some of the things you're already doing can be used to develop and consolidate digital literacy in your classroom. So it's not always about going and doing something else or adding on. Think about those opportunities that you already have, those teachable moments where you can develop and consolidate your students' digital literacy capabilities. And finally, on our website, these are really cool cards. You can actually download these. They are divided into digital technologies and digital literacy. So you get the opportunity, or your students can do this, for them to think, oh, is this a digital literacy example, or is this a concept or something that I would probably see in the digital technologies curriculum? Just a nice resource for you, and they're all free. I'm now going to hand over to Paula, and she's going to take you through a few things that you might need to know about the digital technologies curriculum version 9. Over to you, Paula.
Well, thank you, Anna, for the informative segment on digital literacy. And I think, as you can see, when designing your teaching and learning programs, it's important to not only understand each of the capabilities, but you also need to be very familiar with the relevant learning areas so that you can make those meaningful connections. And I think all of the examples that Anna showed did that. And one word that really resonated, Anna, when you were speaking was about authentic, about the authenticity of what you're doing. You're not using the digital tools as a gadget, you are actually using it to help develop students' understanding of new content. Now, the focus of this segment is on the key differences between version 8.4 and version 9 of the digital technology subject, which was released in term 2 last year. And just as you're listening, you might like to jot down what this segment's telling you and what else you need to know. So let's have a look at those broader things. All learning areas are now organised around core concepts. 8.4, digital technologies was, but there were lots of learning areas that did not have core concepts. All learning areas and subjects now have present foundation as a separate entity. So it has its own level description, content description, elaborations, achievement standards. Previously in digital technologies, foundation was coupled together with years 1 and 2. So now it's a separate entity. I think Anna has illustrated extremely clearly, and as well as how the Australian Curriculum website makes more explicit the relationship between the general capabilities and the learning areas, because you've got those immediate connections, those links which help you, and all up, right across all of the learning areas, there are improved elaborations. So let's have a look now. We'll dive a little bit deeper into the broader changes for digital technologies. So what's happened here is there is a new concept within the digital technologies curriculum that focuses on privacy and security. Two concepts which appeared individually in 8.4, interactions and impact, have actually been coupled and are now part of the learning area concept. I'm going to deal with each of these points in a little bit more detail in a moment. So don't worry if you're not comprehending them straight away. With content descriptions, two good things have happened. Where there were double-barreled content descriptions, they have now been split into two so that it's a lot easier for you to actually understand the expectations rather than guessing. And there have been some instances where wording has just been tweaked. Anna spoke about maths, and the math situation is an interesting one because collectively, the content related to data acquisition and data interpretation is still studied, but it only has one address. In 8.4, it sits both in digital technologies and in mathematics, but I will explain to you in a moment how it's treated in version 9. The achievement standards have been rewritten as one paragraph. In Digi, they have always been two in version 8.4, and there's been some new terminology. So let's have a look now at each of these in a little bit more detail. As you can see, there's now a set of learning area concepts, and some which are particular to digital technologies and some which are particular to design and technologies. And the two that I've spoken about are interactions and impact and privacy. And what happens is all of the learning area concepts underpin the subject concepts. So there is a really close connection. They are connected, and we will show how a new privacy and security concept has been done. But before I go into the details about privacy and security, I just wanted to recap what is a concept. And a concept are the big ideas or the building blocks that actually form the foundation of any curriculum. They are the main driving threads. I like to think of them in a way as like magnets, so that, and they're mental magnets, so that while you've got individual pieces of content descriptions, somehow they need to be organized so that our thinking is more coordinated, more cohesive, and that we can ultimately think in a more abstract way. So let's just have a look. I've got an example now that will show you how a concept typically progresses from quite simple into more complex. And then in the following slide, you will actually see that illustrated for two concepts. One of them is digital systems. And can I just make a comment that the concepts within the actual curriculum documentation aren't labeled, aren't badged. You can't just dial up and say, can I see all of the specification, content descriptions related to specification. Rather, they are the invisible threads. But as you can see in digital systems, which also happens to be a substrand, from foundation, the level of cognition is very low. It's a low order thinking skill, recognize, and the content is quite straightforward. This progresses up to 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, where we experience higher order thinking skills as well as more diverse content. It's become more complex in its nature. So that gives you the thread, but that concept of digital systems connects all of them. Now, specification is a concept which focuses primarily on the process of analysis, which is really quite hard. And it's why we don't even start any content descriptions. And what we do at a level years 1 and 2 is very simple, because the process of specification focuses on the ability to be able to break down a problem into manageable size pieces. And within digital technologies, we call that process decomposition. That then allows you to be able to describe a problem clearly and precisely. And it also allows you to be able to state what is required to solve the problem. If you don't get that right, then it doesn't matter what you create afterwards, because it ain't going to fix the problem. So it's really that the concept of specification is really fundamental, and we've got to do that gently, Bentley, with the content descriptions and scaffold it up. So you will see the progression from 1 to 10. Let's move on and have a look now at the actual concept of privacy and security. The new one, and as I said, as Anna had said, it has a similar line in digital literacy. The concept of privacy of data is primarily focusing on ownership and the responsibilities that we have about our own data and the data that belongs to other people. Security is a lot more about how do we protect data which is stored, communicated, and manipulated from unauthorized access, from threats. So it has a strong focus on how do we mitigate the risks associated with attacking the data which is communicated, stored, and manipulated. Okay, let's mooch on a little bit and we can have a look at content descriptions. For you primary teachers there, you might give a sigh of relief now and say, well, this is nice. No new content descriptions in F to 6. Here I'm going to show you an example of splitting a compound, a double-barreled content description that exists in 8.4, and how the splitting of it increases the clarity and expectations. So we have 2 clauses there. One is about the components, the other one is about networks. The content hasn't changed in version 9. It's just been packaged into 2 smaller parcels rather than one bigger one. And that makes it a lot easier for you to do your planning, and it also increases the clarity. If we have a look at another example of what we do with content descriptions, some of them are refined, where it's just a minor tweaking of the words. So just have a look at what's happened with that content description to do with data representation. One new thing that has happened in data is that binary to do with data representation that was in years 7 and 8 has now come down to years 5 and 6. So that's been one shift. It's not new content, it's just got a new address. Okay, we'll now have a look at another example, and this is a big one for primary teachers, but in a way, it is a really perfect example of how the developers of the curriculum in mathematics and in digital technologies looked at the matter of the crowded curriculum and said, we've got a pretty high level of duplication in the content between knowledge and skills associated with acquiring or collecting data and interpreting it. And you saw some of those examples that Anna gave you about in digital literacy and what you do with interpretation. So what's happened in digital technologies, as I said earlier, is that the content descriptions foundation to year 6 in 8.4 relating to data acquisition and data interpretation have actually migrated to mathematics in the statistics strand, and the only content descriptions that you find within the data family is data representation. And you've seen some examples of content descriptions there. So data acquisition and data interpretation are now in mathematics, F to 6. But data representation is in, but you actually have to be a super sleuth to find out where you would have found that information. So in the learning descriptions for every level, foundation 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 in the digital technologies curriculum, you will find the following sentence. Just have a quick read. Now that should be, it's supposed to act as a very big prompt to you to say, if you are a primary teacher, you're teaching maths, then the knowledge and skills associated with data acquisition and then the processing and interpretation, the data, the skills and knowledge that you learn from mathematics are also applied in digital technologies. But this differs then in F to 6, in 7 to 10. So we'll have a look now at what happens in 7 to 10. The 3 data concepts return. So data representation, acquisition, and interpretation all have content descriptions. And that's reflected in an extract there from the Level 8 Achievement Standard. And again, there are 2 clauses. The first clause is about acquisition, interpretation, and modelling data using spreadsheets. And the second one is about representing. And I just want to say here that I think the specific use of the terminology here is really informative. It's now saying, teachers, when you are assessing students' ability at this level, are they at level 8? They actually need to be able to be using spreadsheets, and they need to have a knowledge of integers and binary. That level of specificity is really such a good safety valve for you as teachers. It gives you concrete pieces of evidence upon which you can make quite informed judgments. Let's have a look at achievement standards. I said that in version 9, the 2 paragraphs have been collapsed into one. But I'm giving you a little bit of an insight here, because this isn't flagged within the curriculum. The first sentence in all of the achievement standard statements basically provide you with a macro, higher order, overarching, in a nutshell, what else can I say? Mega statement about the expectations, the performance expectations at that particular level. So at year 8, students develop and modify creative digital solutions, decompose real-world problems, and evaluate alternative solutions against user stories and design criteria. The rest of the achievement standard then goes into more details, but the overarching aspiration, I suppose, is the first sentence. So now we're going to have a look at terminology, because one of the things I said is that there has been an increase in new terminology and new vocabulary, but all for a very good reason. This level of specificity takes the guessing out of what you need to teach, and it also adds to the literacy demands, as Anna was saying. Our students should be using the correct terminology that's relevant to digital technologies. That's part of the literacy of the discipline, and that's what they get brought up on. So from get-go, students should be using the correct terminology. And in this curriculum, there is a Word document for a glossary, as well as a hover over when you are on the website. You'll note in levels, in the level 8 achievement standard there, that the last term, cybersecurity threats and digital footprint, a terminology associated with the new concept. And then if you look down beneath that, the last row, their behaviours multi-factor authentication, they too are new terms associated with that new concept of privacy and security. So I'm getting close to wrapping up my segment. So in a nutshell, I'm looking at these comparative statements. I think version 9 is providing you with greater clarity about what needs to be taught, as articulated in the content descriptions, and the levels of performance articulated in the achievement standards. There are far greater connections between the content descriptions and the elaborations, other learning areas and general capabilities, as illustrated by the screenshots that Anna has provided. You've just seen some examples of a sharper focus on terminology. So there's a lot more emphasis on being explicit in this curriculum and taking the guessing out of it. And there is far more coherence within the digital technologies curriculum with respect to all of the elements. The concepts, level descriptions, content descriptions, elaborations, and achievements. So just finishing my little bit, if you want to have a look at some further resources to help you get a handle on version 9, go to the Australian Curriculum website, and in particular, I suggest that you read 3 documents. One is about the learning area, one is about the subject. And for an auditing purpose, have a look at the comparative information document, because I think it's really useful for you to have a look at your teaching and learning resources now. Have a look at the extent of changes. Has a content description just been refined, or has it been modified, or has it been deleted? And that will inform you about the extent of change that you need to make to your resources, because you don't have to begin from the beginning. There's a really strong basis, as you've seen. And as Anna had mentioned, we are about to commence work on the Grok resource of unpacking the curriculum for version 9. So thank you, Anna. I'm going to pass back to you for the concluding slides.
Well, thank you, Paula. And that was an excellent example, or an excellent way of, I suppose, sharing those big changes from version 8 to version 9. Thanks so much, Paula. As we mentioned at the beginning, we have a series of presentations prepared to deliver, and the next one is data representation. And finally, which hopefully you all know, all of the resources and content on the Grok Academy platform are free for every Australian student and teacher. And that's due to the wonderful partnership with WiseTech Global. Finally, the QR code will take you directly to the website. And of course, any questions you might have, you can always contact help@grokacademy.org. And on that note, we are going to finish up now. And I want to say thank you, everyone, for your attention throughout our presentation. Thank you. And Paula, would you like to say goodbye?
No, just thank you very much. And I hope that you are able to make the time to engage in all of the presentations. So thank you very much, Anna.